Hey everybody, my name is Spaz and I'm a CD Junkie. On this episode of CD Junkie, I'm going to be talking about one of the most popular, underrated bands of all time. That's right, I'm talking about The Association. Why are The Association underrated? Well, why aren't they considered rock gods? Now, everybody knows their hit singles, Windy, Cherish, Everything That Touches You, Never My Love, Along Comes Mary, but people really don't delve too much into the albums. I think that people who only know the hits should really dig deep into the Association catalog because there's a lot of experimentation. There's a lot of different things going on there that will reveal a different side to the band. Now, some people call them folk rock. Some people call them sunshine pop. Some people call them psych pop. Some people call them easy listening, middle of the road. Whatever. You know what? The Association, gather up all that stuff together, crunch it together. That is the Association. So whatever they mean to you, you are correct. So let's get into the catalog. Right before I do that, I want to tell you how I got into the band, and that's the same way everybody else did. Heard the hits on the radio. By the time I was 3 or 4, I was aware of the Association. My parents had the Along Comes the Association album, as well as the Inside Out album. And of course, I remember being very little, 4 or 5 years old, and my Aunt Wendy was babysitting myself, my brother, and my sister, driving around town. The song Windy comes on the radio, and she's going, oh, they wrote this about me, Windy, Wendy. We knew she was joking. What I didn't find out until later is my Aunt Wendy actually used to go see the Association before they became famous, and I find that quite exciting. But let's start with the catalog. 1966. Along Comes the Association, produced by Kurt Becher. This is the album that contains the singles Along Comes Mary and Cherish. Those are the 2 big hits that you would know off this album. Still fantastic, perfect example of California sunshine pop, the way it should be. Great harmonies, great songs, lots of interesting things going on in this album. At this point, they were a 6-man band. Terry Kirkman, Ted Blachell, Russ Jaguar, Jim Yester, Brian Cole, and Gary Alexander. Fantastic band. That's the stereo version. If you want the mono version, try Steve Stanley's Now Sounds label, and you will be able to get not only the rare mono mix of the album, but lots of bonus tracks, including single versions, which were slightly different, plus instrumental tracks. That's a great collection there. Later that year, 1966, the band put out Renaissance. Now, they had gotten rid of Kurt Becher as a producer and brought in Jim Yester's brother Jerry from the Modern Folk Quartet. They brought him in to produce the album, and they actually were able to play all the instruments on this album, which they were not allowed to do on the first album. Kurt Becher had his pick of studio musicians and he used them. But this album they got to play. This album is not as stunning as Along Comes the Association, but it's still a great collection of songs. And you'll definitely also be able to pick up the Now Sounds mono version of the album with the same kind of fun single versions, instrumentals, all that fun stuff. So that you definitely need to check out. Here's a fun fact. Gary Alexander left the band at this point to study meditation in India. And this was a year before the Beatles did the same thing. So the Beatles were just cheap Association copycats. Gary was then replaced by Larry Ramos. Here's another fun fact. Larry Ramos was a member of the New Christy Minstrels, and he plays on my favorite Christmas album of all time. And here's fun fact, point 5. Larry Ramos' son works with my brother, or he did at least. Now with Larry Ramos in the band, they recorded the album Inside Out. This was produced by Bones Howe, and this contains the hit singles Windy and Never My Love. I will tell you one thing about Never My Love. The song is one of the most moving, beautiful pieces of music in rock history, and I will tell you that the only band that got close to that ooey gooey love feeling of that song was when the Carpenters put out things like Close to You and stuff. It's on the same level, not musically, but emotionally. But Inside Out, fantastic album. That came out in 1967. Here is the mono version on the Now Sounds record label. Again, featuring tons of bonus tracks. Here's another fun fact. On June 13th, 1967, the Association was the first band to play the Monterey Pop Festival. So give them some love for that. 1968 rolls around and out comes the album Birthday, again produced by Bones Howe. This has got Everything That Touches You. Oh my gosh. This is such an amazing record. In fact, this is probably, at this point today, my favorite Association record. It's so filled with joy, and it travels down so many different musical avenues, and it's truly, truly an amazing album. Birthday by the Association, 1968. I would be able to show you the Now Sounds mono edition, but I don't own it. I will get it eventually. From what I understand, it does not include any bonus tracks, but I love Steve Stanley's liner notes, so I would get it just for that and to have the mono version of the album, of course. At the end of 1968, the band released their still popular Greatest Hits album. I do not own a copy. I've been waiting for a remastered version, a better sounding version, but I'm going to eventually have to get it because it does have a new version of Enter the Young, and it has a stereo version of Six Man Band. It's just a necessary addition to my Association catalog. Hey, here's another fun fact. Remember when Gary Alexander left the band after the Renaissance album? Well, around the time of the Greatest Hits album, his twin brother Jules joined the Association. No, I'm just kidding. Actually, it's the same guy. Gary Alexander is Jules Alexander. I think Jules was his birth name. So he actually rejoined the band. So the Association became a 7-piece with the return of Jules Gary Alexander. In 1969, they recorded 4 songs for the Goodbye Columbus soundtrack. And later that year, they released the self-titled album, The Association, commonly known as the Stonehenge album. This album was not produced by Bones Howe, who had produced the previous 2. It was actually produced by the Association and John Boylan. Remember all the different styles I told you that the Association played and they crumbled them all together? Well, this is the album where they sort of separated them a little bit. So there's a folkier song. There's, a couple classic harmony-laden pop songs. There's some psych songs. It's a really great album, but since it was different from the other stuff, some people maybe didn't connect quite with it because they were expanding. Compare it to what the Beach Boys were doing, when they were getting a little more hippy-dippy, maybe exploring different sounds that people didn't want them to explore, but as artists, that's the direction they wanted to go in. Still, lots of great material, great vocals, and you should definitely check that out. That was 1969. And of course, the Now Sounds version is the stereo version of the album, plus mono versions of various singles released or recorded around the same time. Definitely another thing to add to your collection. 1970 brought us the Association Live. Unfortunately, I'm not a fan of live albums, no matter who it's by, and so I've never bothered to pick it up. But damn it, I've been listening to the Association so much lately, I'm tempted. So I may have to break down and buy my first live album in many years. After that album was released, Russ Giguere left the band, and he was replaced by a gentleman by the name of Richard Thompson, who on every single Association release, it says not to be confused with the British singer-songwriter. The Association themselves, they put out the album Stop Your Motor. Again, as you can tell, they're going the folky, hippy-dippy route, and lots of great songs on this album. If you're expecting Along Comes Mary and Cherish, you will be disappointed. But it is a fantastic album, and this is the Japanese version, so it's got a couple single versions there. And it's really a great record. Stop Your Motor, 1971. Same time, Russ Giguere put out an album called Hexagram 16. Right there, people go, oh, Russ, he looks like a nice guy. But his album cover, it's like, dude, you steal my weed? But it's a great album. It doesn't sound anything like the Association, but it's just varied, and it's a fantastic album to delve into. So if you run across this on CD or any format, definitely check it out. Hexagram 16, that is the first and only solo album, as far as I know, from Russ Giguere from the Association. After Stop Your Motor, the Association left Warner Brothers and they signed with Columbia for Waterbeds in Trinidad. And this album contains a great version of Darling Be Home Soon, the Love and Spoonful track. It's a great album. Again, it continues in that Stop Your Motor direction. Great harmonies. It's the Association doing what they artistically feel like doing, and everyone else going, oh, Cherish isn't on this album. But it's still a great collection of songs, so anybody who loves well-crafted, well-written songs, Waterbeds in Trinidad, check it out. Sadly, bassist Brian Cole died of a drug overdose after the release of this album, and the band sort of disintegrated completely after that. Now, there have been reunions over the years. There's been different tours. All the surviving members got back together the end of the 70s, and if you go on YouTube and you watch, I think it's like Live at Coconut Grove or something, you'll see that, oh my gosh, they sound better than ever. While they continued to stay together for the next couple of years, and they recorded a few singles, and they tried to get some interest. I think Elektra signed them and put out 3 singles. Nobody would put out an album, and the band slowly fell apart again after that. There were 2 different releases that came out. One was called New Memories, and another one was called Vintage, but that was basically them re-recording their hits, or re-recording songs from that time period, or re-recording hits of contemporary artists. It wasn't the full band, and it wasn't really new material. It wasn't until 1995 that the association put out an album called A Little Bit More. The material on this album was not written by any of the band members. Only Larry Ramos and Russ Jaguar are on this record. For completists, you might want to grab it. That's all I'm really going to say about that record. It sounded like a mid to late 80s album released about a decade too late. In closing, I want to talk about 2 compilations that you should all be aware of. One is called Just the Right Sound, the Association Anthology. Came out in 2002 on Rhino. This contains album tracks, single versions, rarities. There's a couple unreleased tracks on there, and it's a great overview of their entire career. Definitely check that out. But Now Sound's put out a great set called the Complete Warner Brothers and Valiant Singles Collection. This is a 2 CD set, almost all completely in mono, chronological, and it features tracks and non-album tracks straight through to about 71. And that's a great collection. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed sitting through this video. I'm sorry I just jibber-jabber too much. I'm so excited. This is such a great band. If you have Association albums or CDs in your collection, please pull them out and listen to them now. If you don't, go immediately to your local record store or go online and purchase stuff. Because remember, if you have to take the devil's way out and stream a little bit, just stream, find out which albums you want to get, and then buy them. Whether you buy them digitally or physically, just go out, support the bands that created the soundtrack to your life. And I also want to point out this. This is where I get the little mini LP sleeves. You can buy that as well. Is it an import? Original album series contains the first 5 albums. No bonus tracks on those, but they are the stereo versions. You're only going to get the bonus tracks if you buy the Now Sounds discs. Anyway, that's it. I appreciate you hanging out for a little while. And until the next time, smell you later.